Number 1. I hear a lot of scary shopping stories, and they're usually from the perspective of the person who is shopping. However, my scariest experience happened when I was working in a bookstore about 2 months after I was promoted from bookseller to assistant manager, and we were hit by a Christmas rush. It was always so overwhelming, really. By the end of one night, everyone was so wiped out. Getting all the receipts and drawers counted at the end of the night took so much time. On the nights that I was closing, I let the workers go as soon as they were done. There was no reason to make them stick around, as they'd be tired for the next day. After I let everyone go, I went back into the office to do my work. After a while, I heard the doorbell ring. We had security cameras, but they weren't aimed at the door, so I had to go to the front door to see who it was. There was a guy there, and he was dressed in dark clothes and had his hood up. I asked him how I could help, of course watching him through the door. "Hey dude, I left my wallet in your store," he told me. "Can you open the door and let me come in and get it?" I asked him where he thought he left it, and that I would look for it for him. He didn't like that idea, and told me he wasn't too sure, as he'd been shopping throughout the entire store, which meant I'd have to look aisle by aisle. I asked him if he'd bought anything, to which he replied yes, which meant he had to have his wallet on him at that point. I even pointed that out to him, and he seemed a bit taken back. I told him we didn't get anything turned in, but I could take his information and get back to him if we found anything. The man began to get angry, telling me that he needed his wallet for tonight, and he couldn't wait for me to look for it. He kept insisting that I let him in so he could look for it with me. When I told him there was no way I was letting him in the store this late, especially when I was on my own, he became visibly angry. He even threatened to call the police and tell them that I stole his wallet. He even got his cell phone out of his pocket and acted like he was going to call them. At that point I'd had enough. I told the guy the best I could do was to take down his information and give him a call if anything was found. I then told him that if it wasn't good enough, then there wasn't anything at all I could do for him. He got visibly angry and began swearing at me. He grabbed the door and began shaking it, demanding that I open the door. I told him I was going to walk over to the customer service desk and call the police. I wasn't willing to cooperate anymore. As I made my way over there, I noticed the guy take off down the streets. I thought that was the end of him, and figured that I didn't really need to bother with the police. I went back to my work and tried my best to get it done, so I could go home and get some rest. It took me about another 2 hours to honestly finish all of my work. I hadn't heard the doorbell ring, and pretty much figured that I wouldn't be seeing that guy again. However, when I was going to the front of the store, I did one look around to see if anyone was in the parking lot before I went outside. I went out to my car in the cold and couldn't wait to get out. However, I froze. When I was maybe within a couple of feet from the car, there was someone in the back seat of my car. He was hiding down on the back seat with his hood over his head. There was definitely someone in the back seat of my car. I knew it. There had to be. Furthermore, he must have seen me or he wouldn't have dug down. I did the only thing I could think to do. I turned and ran at full speed back to the store. I didn't look back until I'd made it to the front door of the store. As I did, the man screamed all sorts of foul language at me, telling me he was going to kill me and cut me up. As the door opened outward, I quickly pushed it toward him, knocking him to the ground. Before he could even realise what happened and recover, I was able to get the door closed and locked. I immediately called the police, before anything else could have happened to me. Story number 2. I really wanted a PS4 when they were originally released. I tried everything to get one as quickly as possible. The local Best Buy was having a Black Friday sale, and I stood in line like everyone else. Of course, I was nowhere near being lucky enough to actually get my hands on one. I then turned to an alternative method of going online. As much as I wanted one, eBay and Amazon were reselling them for far too much money, and I could hardly afford it. So after several days of trying my best, I'd come to the conclusion that I wasn't going to get one. It was then that I thought I came across a bit of luck. Going through Craigslist, I found that someone was selling their new PS4 at no more than the original buying price. I of course was very sceptical, as I couldn't understand why they'd do that. I also figured, as in demand as the system happened to be, why on earth would someone be selling it right away? I immediately emailed the seller and let them know that I was very interested and hoped they'd still got hold of it. I was quite surprised to get an immediate response, suggesting that they did still have the PS4 and would be willing to sell it to me. What a result. They asked for my address so they could bring it over. I was sort of hesitant at first, and asked if it would be better to meet in a public place. I wasn't too keen on the idea of someone coming over to my house. He let me know that he was going to be very busy all day, and that he couldn't meet in public, but he'd be able to swing by my house after work. I was still really hesitant on this idea, but I really wanted that PS4. Of course I stupidly agreed and gave him my address. I figured it was much safer than a public place. This whole exchange took place about 9 AM. I was so happy and so eager to get my new PS4. My eagerness only grew as I began waiting for the guy to show up. Hell, I not only began waiting for him, I waited for him for a long time. Hours passed by, and I began to think he wasn't coming. It had gotten around 2 PM, and I'd gotten really impatient. I tried everything, emailing him, looking for a number, but I had no luck, and no response. At around 6 PM I'd lost all hope. I'd figured that most likely he'd got a better offer from someone else. He didn't have the balls to tell me. I was disappointed more than I could possibly tell you. It's one of those things not to have gotten the item from the store. I could come to terms with that. But I was so close to having one in my hands. So close. For the rest of the night, I kept looking around on Craigslist, but I wasn't able to find anything in my price range. I'd wasted an entire day and an entire evening. It was past midnight, and I had nothing to show for it. I was getting ready for bed, and that's when I heard something. A thud. At first I dismissed it, thinking it was my imagination, until I heard it again. Was that someone knocking on my door? I walked up to the door and looked out the window. There was a guy standing on the front porch. He identified himself as the guy who had the PS4. He apologised for being so late and told me he got caught up at work. He then immediately asked me if I had the money. I opened the door but kept the screen door closed. I told him I had the money upstairs, but I was puzzled when I didn't see the PS4 with him. I asked him where it was, to which he replied, "No worries, it's in the van, I'll go get it." He then told me to get the money and come out to the van with him. I let him know I wasn't really comfortable walking to his van, and he told me it was alright. I looked over his shoulder, saw there was someone trying to duck down in the passenger seat window. I then clocked on. The guy at my front porch had his hands in his pockets the whole time. There was something more than just his hand in there, I thought. I told him I'd go get my wallet and then come back, to which he protested as I slammed the door in his face. I was way too uncomfortable with this. I went over to the phone to call the cops, and as I did, I heard a much louder bang on my front door. After a few moments, I watched the van drive away. When I went to check to see if any damage had been done, I was nearly sick. I saw a knife embedded into the door with a note underneath, saying, "We'll be back." I was right. He had had something in his sweatshirt, and I knew I shouldn't have gone to the van with him. Nothing has happened as of yet, but I'll keep you posted. Story number 3. Normally, I don't go out Christmas shopping on Black Friday. I know there's deals to be gone, but the actual amount of people who benefit from them is pretty low. It sometimes seems that there's more negativity than anything. The only time I've been out on Black Friday was honestly one of the worst experiences I've ever had. It was a few years back. The big Christmas gift that year was a game called Uno Attack. It was supposed to sell out pretty quick, and my nephew really wanted one. So I decided for the first time ever to brave the Black Friday crowd. I waited outside the store in line for it to open. The entire time I kept wondering why people were so eager about doing this. It was cold, and although I was reasonably bundled up, it didn't help that I had to spend so much time stood still. In addition, people were in terrible spirits, which seemed to take the spirit away from the event. Some people would try and cut in, which only made the people already in the line angrier. When the store was getting closer to opening, I noticed there was a colleague from the store who'd headed out to each person in the line. When they got to me, I realised they were handing out tickets, indicating who'd be able to buy a copy of the Uno Attack. He asked me if that's why I was there, to which I replied, yes, of course it is. He told me I was lucky, because I was getting the very last ticket and the last copy of the Uno Attack. Of course this caused some frustration and groaning and swearing from the people behind me, although I hated the idea that there'd be a lot of children who wouldn't be getting the toy they wanted. I was chuffed. That wasn't until this guy got out of line and walked up to me. He came immediately after the worker had left. He first offered to buy the ticket from me. I told him no, because it wasn't a matter of money. It was a matter of me trying to make my nephew happy. He then started telling me that his son really wanted the toy. I countered this with letting him know that my nephew also really wanted the toy. When I kept refusing his offers, he started telling me other stories, such as his son was really sick, but I could tell he was just trying to do this to make me feel guilty. From further back in line, a few other people began piping up, telling the guy to leave me alone. He got into a slagging match with several of them. Eventually he stopped away, but not before telling me I'll get that toy, and I'll make you sorry. I tried not to think about it. I went to the store and claimed the Uno Attack, did some more shopping. I figured that since I'd spent so much time outside, I should try and make the most of it and get as much done. Once I'd finished up in that store, I went back out to my car to put all the toys in the trunk. I then planned on going to the bookstore in the strip mall in order to get some other items. When I began walking back to the car the second time, I paused. I noticed the man from earlier leaning on my car. I began feeling tense and sick, knowing the guy was going to confront me again. He was much bigger than I was, but I decided I couldn't let him intimidate me. As I got close to the car, he noticed me and smiled. He reached into his pockets. I assumed he was reaching for his wallets, but it only took me a moment before I saw him flip open a knife. I immediately stopped. I couldn't imagine the guy would be so stupid enough to try and threaten me or stab me in a busy parking lot. However, I didn't want to test that theory, so I turned and ran back to the store. I let security know what happened, and they gave me a personal escort out to the car. The man was gone, but I was still visibly shaken. I was more shaken when I noticed the knife marks in the lock and the slashed tyres. There were also deep scratches in my driver's side door, saying "I'll get you." That is my first and last experience with one of the Black Friday rushes, and I'll never be doing it again.